Hi everybody. Today we've got Pete Shuttleworth. Pete, how are you doing?
Hi Graham, fine, yeah, all good, thank you. You?
Fab, yeah, really good. Do you want to just tell everybody what you do, what your day job is, and what does that consist of?
I'm currently head of performance analysis, or head of tactical analysis, we like to call it, at Birmingham City. Um, Loads of stuff to it, really, loads of stuff. We could go on all day about performance analysis, but just to give you a little flavour, that we sit on, we work with the coaches, we work with the players, we look at how, leading up to a game, we might look at how the opposition play, give the coaches feedback so they can make a plan of how to prepare for the upcoming game. We then, with the coaches, we then take that information and then work out what we would decipher to the players, because obviously as we get towards the playing end, the chunks of information become lower, because obviously they're the ones who are going to perform. So little short, sharp bits of information are vital. And then during the game, we sit live at the game. We watch the game on a computer, so we've always got the option of going back and looking at certain things and looking at patterns that are developing in the play, and then can feed that back to the coaching staff at half time and full time as well. So very busy. It's an all-encompassing job. We also do all the little tag-ons, like we look at set pieces, a big part of performance analysis. We look at how people are going to try and break us down from set pieces, and as well as then on top of that, analysing the league. What's the patterns in the league? What's the patterns in football? What's the trends? Where are they going? So yeah, that's it in a nutshell, really. But we could talk, as we have done many times before, we could talk for hours, really, without boring the listeners.
Fab. So yeah, and I hope as we go on in this conversation, we'll talk about performance psychology and emotional intelligence, and maybe how that fits into your role a little bit as well. But let's kick off with you, because your background before going into football was education, and since I've known you, you were involved in triathlon as well. Do you want to just tell me a little bit about your story and how you got into the world of professional football?
Yeah, it was a long one, great. To be fair, like I always wanted to. I was an academy footballer. I played for Nottingham Forest, all the way through from about 11 to 15, back in the days of the famous Mr. Clough. So good grounding. We were very technically coached. It was a high class, centre of excellence, we were called back then. And back then, I also played county cricket as well, up to second 11 cricket. So always tried to balance the two. So elite sport was always part of my growing up. In fact, every other sport that I did, the swimming and things like that I did as a kid, was all to try and be fitter to become a footballer. That was my aim. That didn't happen. Got released at 15, had 1 year at Coventry, got released at 16, so never made that scholarship. So I went to Loughborough University. Again, elite level, really enjoyed that, and became a teacher. Did my PGC and became a teacher. And then after that, I taught for 15 years as a PE teacher. Same school, really enjoyed that journey. But as well as doing that, at the same time, I coached. I had my first manager's job at 27. So I took that on, learned very much about non-league football, down at that level. Then became an assistant manager and had a real good 3 or 4 years as an assistant manager, and had some decent success with a friend of mine who was a manager, and really enjoyed that role. And then gave that up because I was really big into the triathlon. And then an opportunity came up to scout, recruitment scout at Birmingham, through an old friend of mine. And I did that for 2 years on a part-time retainer basis. So it's been a really long journey to get there. And when I talk to people, I do say, yes, I've had quite a few knockbacks on the way. I wanted to become a player. I wanted to become a coach. I then wanted to probably be a full-time scout. And then suddenly an opportunity came around to become a full-time analyst. And I jumped at that chance and left teaching. Big gamble at 38, I think I was at the time, and went into the world of professional football. So, yeah, it's been quite a long, interesting, turbulent journey to get there.
Yeah, but you love football. So it's not a gamble, is it? You can always go back and teach.
Yeah, Graham, it was a gamble. But yeah, speaking to like I remember speaking back to you in the day and thinking about, you know, taking this opportunity, and it was the right one to take because I do love football and I'm really passionate about it, and you know, I've spent many hours watching it anyway. So now to go and do it as your occupation, and I still get a buzz. You know, I still get the buzz from, you know, walking out and seeing the pitch and the players, and you know, I still get that buzz from it. So yeah, gambling, that it's a turbulent world. There's a turnover of staff that wasn't the same as what I experienced in education, but at different times in your life, you have to take them opportunities and hope they work, knowing, like you've just said, that there's a fallback going back into education. So I don't regret it one little bit, really.
Yeah, throughout this series of conversations that I've been having over the last month with people, the one thing that really stands out is their passion, whether it's their passion for business, passion for teaching, or passion for sport. And as you know, my background is tennis, but one of my biggest highlight moments ever still as a non-tennis player was walking onto the pitch at Roker Park with Ruben Agbula and smashing one in the top net in the full end. And there's nobody there. It was an empty ground, but it just made you feel really good, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And we share that. That's what, you know, we connected through a different line, but I remember the first time I saw you deliver, and yeah, the passion for sport. And we went on a training weekend with, what was it, 30 of us, and in that room you could tell the ones who were passionate about it. And you know, it just, the thing is, and we've spoke long and hard, and we have many chats, you know, as we'll come through this, but it takes over your life. You know, it does take over your life. I drive into Birmingham every day, living away. I live 70 miles from the training ground. I spend a lot of hours there. As an analyst, you're always at the beck and call of coaches or managers. So sometimes, you know, I might have done what I think is my day's work, but then somebody might spring something on you at 3-4 o'clock just as you're packing your stuff up, and you've got another hour to do, or you know, you've got to go into a meeting because it's been called. And again, without that passion to actually do it, you know, if you go into sport thinking it's a 9 till 4 job and that's it, you know, and it's just a job, then I don't think you'd last very long. So the passion bit has to make up for all them things you don't get out of it. You know, the fixed hours, the backroom wages as such. You know, it's the passion that makes you want to work in it. So, you know, yeah, we do share that.
So how have you managed to get through the fact that there's no football? We're in a pandemic. I'm at home. You're at home. How have you managed to deal with that yourself as an individual?
What I tried to do is I struggled in the first couple of weeks. It was hard. The paranoia about the virus, you know, a little bit health conscious, always have been. So for 2 weeks, you know, it was sleepless nights. When are we going to get this? What's it going to do to us? My family, etc., who've been locked down and shielded, as we've talked about. So yeah, it was really difficult. Found it really hard. And then what I decided to do is reconnect with some of my old habits, really, because what I've lost in the last 3 years of working in football are a lot of my fitness from when I was a triathlete, you know, which then leads into diet habits and things like that. Yes, there's times when I don't see my kids as much as I should. I've got 2, you know, beautiful kids who I love to bits, and I don't see them as much as I should when I'm away with the team. And if we're two away games in a week, I might go 4 or 5 days that week without seeing them. Mm-hmm. So I turn it into a positive of let's connect with the family. I massively appreciate the work my wife does now in terms of looking after the 2 of them while I'm off, you know, in London or wherever, the work that she puts into the 2 of them. And I've connected with that and had a massive appreciation of that. And like I say, then got back into my fitness. So I've ran most days. I've had little eating challenges with a mate of mine who wants to do similar. So, you know, little challenges to cut out certain bad foods in diets. And I feel much better actually enjoyed running. I've not enjoyed running for 3 years since I gave up triathlon. I'm actually, you know, turned it into a positive way. I enjoy going out again now. I feel lighter. I feel like I'm hitting the concrete better, and actually, yeah, feel much better about myself. So, yeah, just tried to change the mindset. And, you know, we talked earlier, we've had chats throughout this, knowing that we're both outdoor people and, you know, we're very busy people and we both spend a lot of time away. How are we going to cope? And, you know, talking to people like you about mindsets and things like that really helped in them first few days, first few weeks, because I could have been 9 weeks in now going absolutely, negativity. What do I do? My life, I can't get out of this trap. So, positive mindset had to be the way in this tough time for us all, really.
Yeah, this is where, and I've had this conversation quite a lot over the last couple of weeks with people, is this whole concept about fixed and growth mindset. When we're winning, we don't have a growth mindset. We just have a winning mindset. When everything's going our way, when we're top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of that self-actualization, then actually that's not a growth mindset. It's just everything going our way. You really start to see how people will flourish when they're in things like the pandemics or when they're in teams that get relegated, because that's when you see whether they're fixed or growth mindset in terms of, internally. And this is a great opportunity for, I think, all of us to make some better changes to enhance who we are as people, no matter whether you're our age or 25 or 15. It's a great opportunity, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it is. And we have to look at every opportunity because we don't know when it's going to end. We don't know what life's going to be like after it. So we have to look at evolving our lives, to compass what's happened really. So yeah, totally agree with that.
So have you been doing anything new? Some of the things I've been doing new, just in terms of giving you a bit of flavours, I'm doing a neuroscience and a performance course online. I'm learning to be a qualified life coach because I think some of the skills that you can get from that is great. And I'm also doing a course with Yale, just because I'm quite a badge collector and I like telling stories, and that would be a nice story to tell the kids one day. So what are you doing which is new, just to cognitively get you ticking over, which is not purely football focused?
Phonics and numeracy.
Nice.
Being a parent, the kids are up at 7. They go to bed at 7. I've done little bits of football just to keep connected. We've had a brilliant CPD program through the club where I've had some really good guest speakers, which have been good. So I've tried to tap into them, and some of the companies I work with have offered webinars to tap into. So I've done little things like that, but mainly I've learned what, my oldest son's in reception, and I've learned what they're doing and learning, and how, I never did phonics when I was at school. That we learned differently. So, and when I was a teacher, like you said earlier, I was a secondary teacher. I was 11 to 18. So phonics is new to me. So, I've really enjoyed the learning process of being a teacher and being able to support, my kids and things like that. So that's been very, very good for keeping the cognitive processes going, and quite challenging at times, but it's been good and kept me going.
I always find teachers an interesting one, and having worked across business, education and sport, I always say business people have got it switched on. Their mentoring programs in business nailed. They've got executive coaches who go into businesses, nailed, great programs, a lot of development all of the time, personal development, but also the business development. Sports people are the same. They always have coaches. They'll have support staff, whether it's psych, whether it's S&C, whether it's physiological based, whatever it is, whether it's performance analysis. Teachers tend to do teachy stuff and forget about themselves a little bit. So why, in a profession that is about education, it's about ongoing learning, at what stage do you think teachers forget all of that and forget about themselves a little bit?
Yeah, it's a good point. And going back to being a teacher, you become a really poor learner. Like the CPD sessions, it's strange because you'll sit in front of people who talk about, pedagogy and things like that, and about how to keep boys engaged, for example. And the way they teach you is the opposite to what they are actually preaching. So, teachers are really, can be really challenging to actually deliver to. So, I think, when you're in that mindset of we are teaching other people, and you are, expressing that knowledge to others and thinking about how you can get them to retain that, it becomes very difficult for you to do that extra learning yourself. And, and I live with a teacher, and wife's a teacher, and sometimes she gets back in when she's had a daily lessons and a marking and stuff, and to think then that she'd have to go and do some more learning, I see how exhausted she gets in it towards the end of the term. So, I totally agree. And in my line now, I've been talking to people, and some have learned a new language, some have learned a musical instrument. You know, yeah, me and Jem have learned teaching, but it'd be very interesting to know going through, like you say, if teachers have learned a new skill, or if they've just used it as their summer holidays, like to, recharge and go again.
We run a G10 executive business coaching program that I work with a lot of organizations with as well, but we've just started to evolve that to what we call a GT10 program, which is purely for teachers, and allowing teachers to maybe learn some mindfulness or some personal development themselves, or actually where are their goals? What are their goals? Because actually, when you're at reception, and you're banging the years out, at some stage, you're going to sit there and go, oh, I'm now 40. What have I done?
Yeah. And Graham, I went through that process without, getting political. We talk education all the time, all day. I went in that. So as a young 21-year-old teacher, the passion to go and teach, I absolutely loved the job. It was different back then. It was, there was educating the human being. That's what I always used to class it as. So I remember my first year in teaching, I had a group of 16-year-olds, I was only 21, and on a Friday morning, lesson 1, they needed some core PE. They needed to go out there and just let off some steam. They'd been doing their exam subjects, and they needed it. They needed it. We wwent out, and I always had the underdogs on my team, and always had the best players on the other team. And I played in at centre half. It was the days when you could play a little bit as well. Yeah. And we had a right ding dong for an hour every Friday morning. Luckily, I was free period too, because I used to come off dripping because I'd worked so hard, and that was good. And then, a year later, and this is how I got into my coaching. I had a group of year 11s, and they were disaffected kids, a lot of them. But what they'd got is a really good group of footballers, and I was given their team. They were quite unmanageable. They're not particularly very coachable. And I came in, they knew I had a bit of a football background, and I came in and worked with this group. And again, my passion in that for teaching. We used to train 3 times a week and 2 after school. So, and it was their focus. They came to school every day with a cat. We're training today, and we'd, as a PE teacher, we'd have Monday set pieces, we'd have Tuesday, we'd be working on this, and we had a really good run. And we got to national quarterfinals. This school in Chesterfield, we got to national quarterfinals. In fact, we lost to a school up near you, Cramlington in Newcastle, I think it is. And that provoked my desire to go and coach, but also that was my passion as a teacher, because I could have that time to go and work with human beings. And the amount of teachers who were thankful of this football project, because it stopped said individual being disaffected in maths, because they knew they had to be in training because we were doing something important and they didn't want to miss training. And yes, we used it a bit Coach Carterish, where, if behaviour was that bad, you'd miss a game, and the games were that important, county cup finals, national rounds, they didn't want to miss. So it became a big part of their schooling, and still today they'll still reflect on that. So I came in on that, and then as I went through 15 years as a teacher, I lost my way as well. 40, what am I doing? It's now more results driven. So instead of spending 3-4 lunchtimes working with these footballers, spend 3-4 times doing extra revision for the kids. And now staff were pulling them out of my football session because they were behind on the literacy and numeracy, and so the maths and their English. And it changed. The focus of education changed, and my mindset changed because of that. I'm now working, first starting to, because I love it and I want to have an impact on these kids' lives, and I want to be remembered as the teacher who inspired them. And now I'm working just to make sure I'm not failing, to make sure I'm getting these baseline results that they're getting. And those two different mindsets, which, it's a work you do, are completely different. And I lost my way as a teacher. I'd been trying to get out for a couple of years, but then the lifestyle of living with a teacher, the holidays, the pay, the pension meant that, it was very hard just to go and retrain. So that's why I was very lucky to get this opportunity. But at the time I left teaching to try and get out, I was 4 days a week teacher. I was doing some work with yourself at UK Anti-Doping. I was a part-time scout at Birmingham, doing 3 games a week, sometimes doing a day at school, driving up to Southport to watch a game and getting in at 1 o'clock. and I was training for 15 hours a week as a triathlete. So I was really pushing all my buttons to try and give myself an outlet to get out of teaching, because I'd lost my way, like you said.
And I think we're all guilty of that in parts of our lives. I think the ones who are more successful are the ones who recognize it a little bit earlier. So they have maybe 1 year or 2 years, and then they go, whoa, I need to do something about this. And the ones who really struggle are the ones who get stuck in that 10, 15, 20, that's it. Because you're now in fear zone, and you've got a nice house, you've got a nice wife, you've got, nice money coming in the bank, and now you can't shift. You can't shift because mentally you're in too much fear. And whatever the mechanism is, and it's only really the last couple of years myself that I've really started to analyze my own performance, but I had nearly 10 years abroad, came home, was in education for 8 years, got to the same point you were at, and then it just went, I need to go, and went. So I guess what I'm probably saying at that moment was the first time I started to acknowledge that there was a greater need to change than it was to stay the same. And then went and joined UK coaching for 8 years, and the same thing, but I probably should have left after 6, but I hung on a little bit, and then went, there's a greater need to change, and had to go. And I've been freelance now, I think 10, 11 years, and the different contracts and the different organizations fuels my excitement and passion to continue doing what I do. Yeah,
definitely. And that journey is so typical of so many. And you're right. Teachers now are getting out in the first few years. Why, the wage is replicable in different lines of work, or they maybe get trapped. And it'd be very interesting to see what that period is where you get trapped. You've got your mortgage, you've got your holidays, you're prepared to sacrifice that professional for the benefits that teaching comes. We're very interested to see where that is and what point that is, because some keep going. The other thing is with education is now that the ages of head teachers and deputy head teachers is come right down. So instead of working 15, 20 years to become a head teacher, you now have head teachers within the first 9, 10 years of their teaching career. So, they move really quickly, but then when they get there, what do they do from there? And maybe them who'd sat in and thought, I want to teach for 15 years and become a head in 2025, and now maybe seen as being a little bit old, and they go for the younger, version. So it's been a very changing industry since I was in it. But I think you're completely right. And people then get trapped, and then does that affect their mindset because they're not really enjoying what they're doing? And I'll admit that I wasn't enjoying what I was doing at the end of it. I got a massive lease of life from leaving the industry and doing something new. I wasn't enjoying it. So, how many of them are like that? And then does that affect their performance? Because we know through our performance chats that enjoyment and goal-driven behaviours improve performance. So,
And all the research would say absolutely yes. And I do a lot of work with the police force, as you know, around emotional intelligence. And if you're not on your A game as a coach, as a teacher, as a businessman, as a policeman, how do you expect your pupil, your athlete, the general public to be on their A game? You can't do it. And I think that's what happens is you get stale, you get stuck, your energy levels drop a little bit. And one of the things which I found is that it's not only in the workplace, it's when you go home, you haven't got the energy to spend with your wife or your husband or your kids, and then all of a sudden that starts to eat at you because you're thinking, I'm not a great parent, I'm not a great person. Well, you are. You're not a bad person. You just haven't got that energy and that drive anymore, that ambition, that high level of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, definitely.
And you probably see that with certain football players as well. And there's certain football players who come to clubs and you see, wow, they're right at it and they're loving it. And some of them are maybe at their end of their career and are just maybe seeing out. And that's almost normal as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And without, bringing your team onto it, I watched a brilliant documentary, recently on the Sunderland Till I Die. And I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, I'm a Real Madrid fan. Did I not tell you that?
Yeah, so am I.
I've always said,
I watched that.
I've always said if my dad had supported a proper team when I was growing up, I would have had a happy childhood.
Hey, my love's Everton, so I'm the same. When when these ministers are talking about football going back to cheer us up, I've been negative for 40 years as Everton fan. So, but no, I think trying to work out people's motivation, and that's why I'm not involved in the recruitment process. But recruitment's so important because there's so many factors to it. But you've got to try and work that out. Of are people coming to your club for this reason? Are they coming for this reason? Do they want to achieve? Have they done their achievement and they're on the way down? And you can't get it always right. There's players who you think have done everything. Yeah. I remember a great example was I remember Phil Neville coming to Everton, and I'll say this live on camera. I love Phil Neville because to me he was limited. But what I really liked about him is he dragged every bit of ability out of himself. And I really liked him when he came to Everton. But that bloke had won this many championships. He'd been playing for England. He'd won FA Cups. He'd won everything. So what's his motivation to come to Everton? Now, when you read all the stuff about him, it was, I want to be an important player. So he still had a drive. He wanted to be a first choice. He wanted to be a first name on the team sheet rather than, Phil Neville will drop in at right back, left back, centre mid. So there was still some drive there. But again, when you take a Man U player who's won everything, is there a motivation to still go again? And that's really important in football or in anything really.
I agree, Peter. I'm not going to give you any grief for Phil Neville. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that nobody wants to be a Phil Neville.
Exactly. I think he's talked about in the same bracket as Messi and Ronaldo, isn't he?
Yeah, but nobody wants to be a Gary Neville. That's for sure. Right, just with that, and that brings me back brilliantly to the conversation about you and performance analysis, because recruitment is really huge, and that's why we do a lot of psychological performance analysis on psychometric assessments, personality profile, and emotional intelligence. Question that I have for you is that with all of the research you do in the game analysis and the tactical analysis, do you think there's any way in football that we should be doing analysis on emotional intelligence, on body language, on communication styles? Because you'll see one player who might be quite talented, but comes in and their body language is a little bit like this, and that has a huge negative impact on the environment and everybody else. But if you can monitor that on a day-to-day basis, you can see who's having a high emotional intelligence day or a low emotional intelligence day. And that's where we maybe, as a coaching fraternity support network, should be working with individuals at a much higher level than what we do.
Yeah, I think we spoke long and hard about psychology in football many, many times and things like that. And I'm a big advocate of it because, psychology could be as much as 70-80% they say of a person's performance, don't they? So get people in the right mental place, and you've got someone like we said, recruitment, a new signing who feels valued and feels confident in his surroundings is more likely to be successful for the money you've paid for him than somebody who he has joined a bad group or is can't cope with the pressures of playing for that club. So I think most definitely, I think the problem we've got is that coaches will see that as their, a good coach is probably a really good psychologist. They probably, and the best coaching I've seen is, and I've even started questioning about, is there something in it that's generic, that's natural? The coach saying the right thing at the right time. And I can't say to you, right, at this point in this session, you need to say this to this player. But can a coach recognise, that this is happening and just say the right thing now? Whether that's a negative, whether that's a motivational thing, or whether that's just a little bit of praise. Or, and I just wonder with the great case, I've just watched the Last Dance, as I'm sure, you have a brilliant documentary. And I've just gone to a bit where, they started to question Michael Jordan about some of his techniques. Was he a bit aggressive? Was he a bit of a bully? And, again, his way to try and motivate people and get them when they're having slack days and things like that were to be quite aggressive towards them. Now, as a psychologist and someone who's done all the training you've got, that might make that individual shrink a little bit. But, that was Jordan's method. And at the end of it, they all said, he was a little bit difficult at times. He was a little bit this, he was a little bit that. But it worked. We won 5 titles, 5 championships. So it must have worked. And
there's also a time period with that as well. And time's so vital with everything that we try to measure, because 40 years ago, when Jordan was doing that, the world is a completely different place now, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. And I've just had this chat with someone this morning, actually. We were talking about that episode and going, yeah, can it be like that now? You know, our management and coaching and even teammates have had to change so much because, yeah, it's different. What would have happened now in that Chicago Bulls, that great team? Would he have been alienated by speaking to people like even the best player, you know, one of the best players ever born? Would he have been alienated and people actually not have listened to him and maybe revolted against him because of his methods? You know, in today's society, that could have happened. You know, that people could have gone to social media. People could have done, you know, gone to the media more and talked about what he was saying, and that could have got out that changing room, which might have just, you know, damaged his reputation a little bit. So I totally agree. It's completely different, but just interesting that the psychology element, that was him thinking without the knowledge, that was him thinking emotional intelligence, psychology, what do I need to say to this player to motivate them? You know, whether he had the other side as well, we haven't really seen yet, whether he had the put the arm around the shoulder and go and praise the players he'd been, you know, critical of all week. We haven't really seen that yet, or I haven't, where I'm at to it. So, and that's equally as important and probably more important in today's society, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I agree. And the stuff about that Carol Dweck does on fixed and growth mindset, my personal interpretation is that I don't think you're fixed or growth, and that you're just in those two areas. I think there's a continuum, and I think we're all on that continuum at different stages. Now, one of the things which I think that we should try to do with emotional intelligence and that whole Jordan example is the fact that, how do I measure that? Instead of just allowing coaches to gamble and let me just assume that good coaches are good coaches because they have all of that. Well, that's a very small percentage. The rest are just gambling on the continuum. And sometimes they'll get it right, sometimes they'll get it wrong. But you wouldn't gamble on a free kick routine or a corner routine by not showing videos of what the other team does, how they mark up, where they're going to be. You wouldn't gamble on that. So why do we gamble sometimes with communication and emotional intelligence and personality traits and behaviours?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a really good point. And you know, we, like I say, we've spoke long and hard about how we could get this into football, because it is quite a relatively, you know, closed shop, and certain people have used it, or you know, but that's the difficulty of getting this in when it's, you know, a little bit different at the minute. Probably like performance analysis was different, you know, 10, 12 years ago. Probably, you know, if we were talking 15 years ago, we'd have probably said, oh, what about analysing this, and this? And the conversation might be, oh, coaches do that, so they won't need that. And yeah, I think as sport evolves and you know, revolutionary people with clever thinking mechanisms come in, I think that there's more of a role there. From my own perspective, one of my best things about going into football that I think I developed as a teacher was emotional intelligence. Because even going in there a bit later and a bit older, what I had to learn, you know, when to talk. For one, I've worked with people who you'd be quiet, basically, particularly, you know, result dependent. You know, you let other people feed the mood. So you have to realise where you are, you know, on that coaching ladder, when to offer your opinions, you know, things like when to be positive. You know, when a manager asks you something, and you feel they need a positive answer, and maybe that's not, you know, are we completely honest, or do you dress up? So a big part of my job, because I deal with so many people, I deal with my staff, I deal with coaches, I deal with players, you know, so many things. I have to think about how to deliver and when to deliver and the format to deliver. I think that's really important.
I do. And one of the things which people bring me in for in terms of some of the work that I do with organizations is to work maybe with the players. Actually, my biggest job is to work with the likes of you and the support team and the coaches and the directors, because actually you build the culture there, everything else just filters down lovely.
Yeah, I can imagine that, definitely.
One of the things I was just thinking of there was the whole Ronnie Moore story at Hartlepool when I was there, and he just walked in and goes, "Graham, can you fix one of my players?" And I was like, "I can't fix him, he's not broke." But what we decided to do was we had to decide about changing the culture, because actually it's not about fixing people, it's about evolving a culture. And some people will turn around and say Ronnie was a dinosaur because he was an older type coach. And I'll tell you what, the conversations that we had shows that he wasn't a dinosaur, because he understood that he wasn't very good at that role. He needed somebody to play that role for him. And that's why he brought me in to do that.
Yeah. And I know as a sportsman myself that the different ways to, if I was an individual who was performing confidently, one of the best coaches I've had was a cricket coach I had back in Derbyshire, and he was great for me because he gave me confidence, and he was a bit of a stickler, a bit of a dinosaur. He was known as this person who didn't give much praise at all. But the odd comment to me really worked, because if you can affect the mind and affect the positivity, like we've said before, you can go and perform. So understanding that that's a big part of, you've got your fitness, you've got your physiological elements, but the mental element is so important. So that he was good for me.
Brilliant. Pete, what a great time to finish. I think the world of pedagogy, the world of coaching, the world of sport, and the world of performance mindset, if we could solve those problems in a 40-minute chat, then we would be doing okay, wouldn't we?
We would. It's got many more minutes we need to discuss it over the years.
Brilliant. All right, Pete, thanks very much. And we'll speak soon. For everybody else, please subscribe. Please follow Birmingham City, and maybe follow Pete's new ventures into the world of triathlon or better eating habits.